Hi everyone, we're here today for the second episode of Girl Power Happy Hour, and I'm so glad that you've joined us. Today we have Hanna from Titanium Yoga, and she's going to be discussing some harrowing obstacles that she's overcome in her life and what she did with that and where she turned that into her business. We're so grateful that you're here to join us, to listen in. So grab your coffee or your cocktail, and we hope you find this very inspiring. So today, let's talk about when, where, and how your passion for yoga started.
So it was by complete accident. On March 3rd, 2016, I was not living in Florida, but I was here for work, and I was driving from Fort Lauderdale to Tampa. I worked for a startup at the time, and I was hit head on by a semi truck, and I remember nothing. And so that was 2016. So years later, I still remember nothing, which I think is, I think everything happens for a reason. And I was airlifted to a hospital, and I was never supposed to live. I was never supposed to walk again. And I ended up breaking half of my body. Somehow, I'm really I like to defy the odds. I don't know if determined is the right word, but if someone tells me no, I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna be even better than before. So being hit by the semi truck, I broke my right shoulder, and so I have a titanium rod from my shoulder to my elbow. I broke my right femur, so I have a nice little hole right here, and I have a titanium rod from hip to knee. And then I crushed my left hand, so I have a plate in here. And the funny part about this is they did all of this emergency surgery. And my surgeon, who, I love him to this day, he saved my life. He's the greatest human ever. He wouldn't do my hand because that's a more specialized surgeon. And so my hand surgery they did about 5 days later, when my hand was massive, and I was screaming in agony, and he ended up doing it. But the funny part is I'm kind of a small human, and they couldn't find a plate for a child, so I have a big plate in my hand. So anytime I go get a massage, or you get your nails done, they're like, oh, what's in there? I'm like, oh, it's just a plate. So that is, weirdly enough, how I got into yoga, because when I was leaving the hospital, after 8 days, which isn't that long, I was in the trauma ICU with just the worst cases ever. I was in Lakeland, Florida, which has one of the best trauma ICUs in the country. Everything happens for a reason.
Right.
And I begged and pleaded to leave. Get me out of here. I do not, I'm
the same way. I'm a horrible patient.
Right. And
horrible.
I wanted to get out of there so bad. Listen, they patched me up. I couldn't, I was in a wheelchair. My mom was there from Arizona. My dad and my grandpa were there from Arizona. My sister was there from Texas. That's where I lived previously. And so my whole family was there, and I was like, I gotta go home. This is awful. And so I remember my mom wheeling me out of the hospital, and Dr. Shankman, he was my surgeon, the guy that saved my life, he said, you have such a great outlook on life, it's time to rein it in. And they're walking you out the hospital double doors, you hear when they open. And I was like, what do you mean by that? And he was like, your perspective on life needs to shift, because how active you were before. And I did Pilates and CrossFit, and I was never a runner, but I would run to the kitchen or something. And so your perspective needs to switch, is what Dr. Shankman said, because more than likely you'll never walk again, and you need to seek massive amounts of therapy to kind of wrap your brain around that. And I looked at him in my wheelchair, and I said, in 1 year I will run a marathon, and I'll let you know how it goes. And I left and took a flight back to Dallas, where I lived alone in an apartment, which is not wheelchair friendly. You really find out what's wheelchair friendly in this world, and like nothing is.
Wow. Were you ground floor at least?
No, I was on the 3rd floor. I have an elevator.
Oh, thank goodness.
And I had just turned 30, so I'm 37 now. But I had just turned 30, and for my 30th birthday, I was single, and I was like, I'm gonna get a puppy. And so a puppy shows up. I'm in a wheelchair. There was a lot of craziness going on, but my family, my sister took care of me. I kicked everyone else out. My sister, I was like, you can stay. But I couldn't do anything, like, because everything was broken, so I could not go to the bathroom alone.
Oh, gosh.
I could not take a shower. I could not get myself dressed, like, because you don't have use of a hand. I couldn't open a water bottle. That takes 2 hands. So it was just a crazy transition to life. But funny story, I wasn't bad enough to go into like a care facility, which that's when I'm like, well, what is bad enough?
No doubt.
And so I then started physical therapy for my leg and my arm, and then occupational therapy for my hand.
Okay.
And I had to go to different places. I couldn't drive, so I had some really cool Uber drivers that you'd roll out in your wheelchair and they'd be like, I'm like, can you put me in and then put my chair in? They got big tips. And I remember like my funness, this is so dumb, but my fun was, since I couldn't wash my hair, every Friday I would go get a blowout.
Yeah.
So someone else could wash my hair. But it was like those little things that like made life go on. So about 6 months after the accident, I went back to Florida for a wedding, like in Naples. And I was still in my wheelchair. And of course, the wedding was on the beach. That's always fun. And so we go to this wedding, and I was with my husband at the time, but we weren't married. And I was like, I'm going to go see Dr. Shankman, and we're just going to see what he thinks. And so
because the physical therapy's not working.
It's not as though it's not working. For me, I wanted, I was like, I'm going to do this and it's going to work and I'm going to be perfect again. But we go back, and I just wanted him to, he put it all in me, and he understands the biology of it. And I had people in Florida, which, funny enough, my surgeon's college roommate was an orthopedic surgeon in Dallas, and he was my doctor moving forward. So I love things like that. Like, it all comes full circle. And so he essentially said, you need to go back to him because he needs to just make sure everything's good. Okay. Because I had this blue thread in my shoulder, and he's like, I'm not taking that thing out. I don't know what it's attached to. And I was like, just take it out. There's this blue piece of dental floss in there. And anyways, so when I was in Florida, he took out the blue dental floss that was just like a stitch hanging out, but it was like huge. And I said, I want to walk. I want to try and walk. And he was like, if you want to do it, just do it. I was like, it's not that simple. So we go out in the hallway, and it's a hospital, so there's those rails on the walls, and Dr. Shankman's on one side of me, my husband's on the other side of me, and it's that typical, like, they go under my armpits, and then they kind of like slowly release, and they take my hand to my right hand, because this was still in a cast, to the guardrail of the side of the wall, and I start to walk. But by walk, that's like a very generous word. It was kind of like a shuffle, like the Cuban shuffle or something, where this foot would just shuffle to the side. I was so scared to pick it off of the ground because of my leg. Oh. So that was my first glimpse in, like, I can walk. I probably walked 10 steps, but it was what I needed to keep going. Like, there was a light at the end of the tunnel.
Oh, wow.
We go back into the room, and Dr. Shankman takes x-rays. Things are healing properly. And he says, I was just reading this study from Harvard about how yoga helps with pain, because at this point I was on endless amounts of opioids a day. So I couldn't feel the pain.
Right.
And then at that point I had developed this thing in my stomach where your like stomach lining starts to eat because of the drugs,
Stress.
essentially.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I also have a family history of alcoholism and opioid addiction. And so I was like, I have got to get off of these meds. She's like, you know what? I think yoga would be really helpful, heated, for pain and to just help you feel normal again. And, you know, it might help with, you know, healing. I was like, well, that sounds weird, but I'll try it. So he signed me up. I went back to Dallas. He signs me up for my second ever yoga class. It was at a big box chain on the second floor of a strip mall. I was like, how am I going to get there in my wheelchair? And I go to this yoga class and it was heated. And I didn't sit down. I like somehow got out of my chair, like slithered like a snake out of my chair, and I laid on the floor and I asked the teacher to remove the chair. And I always did that anytime I went to a restaurant so I could feel normal.
Right.
And we do the class. The poor teacher was like, you want to sign 60 liability waivers? Like, I don't know what's happening to you. And I do the class, and because of the heat, I assume, like I was no scientist, but because of the heat, I was done. I got back in my wheelchair and I felt zero pain, which going from, 100 to 0 in 1 hour was incredible. And that was the last day I ever took an opioid.
Wow.
Which was incredible. And then I went home and I flushed them down the toilet, which I guess you're not allowed to do that. Didn't know that, but I was just so proud. And I went back, like I got like an unlimited membership, and I would go 3 times a day because it would take like morning, noon, and night, because it would take my pain away.
Wow.
And I was still doing physical therapy. I was still doing occupational therapy. I also did cupping, chiropractic care. You tell me I could kiss a pig and I could walk again, I would have done it. And so doing so much yoga, I wasn't working at the time because I couldn't. And I ended up having this light bulb moment where my now husband and I went to dinner, and I was like, this works. And there are a lot of people out there, like my family, that take opioids, that drink a lot, and take other pills for anxiety and depression and blah, blah, blah. Like, what if yoga could help that? And he was like, that's cool. When are you going back to work?
Oh.
And I was like, well, I want to do something that I can wear yoga pants every day. And he's like, okay, well, you should figure that out, but I support you, whatever you want to do. And that's like where it got started, this whole thing.
Wow, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So what exposure had you had prior to yoga? Like, you said it was like your second class ever. So.
It was my second class ever. So before my accident, I had taken one yoga class. I'm from Arizona, and I went to the YMCA in Tempe, Arizona, and I took a yoga class, and it was in this like big sterile white room, and it was cold, and it was like you were doing yoga in a hospital. And I was like, what? Like, this is not for me.
Not very peaceful?
It was not peaceful. Like, you like someone lifting weights next door, like, the bell bar or the bar drops down. And so that was literally all the yoga I had had before my accident.
So when you were thinking of taking this leap to taking it to a new level, was there anyone that you could turn to, anyone that like inspired you or that you looked to as kind of like an illustration of how to do it?
So there were real physical people that I knew, and then there were people in books. And so I would say my husband was the greatest cheerleader, and he still is. He's so sweet. Why am I going to cry? Because I cry all the time. But so I'm sure he was like, she is batty crazy. Like, wanting to do this. But like, I think he saw like the passion, and I should rewind. It's not as though one day I was like, I'm going to start a company after an accident. So I went to college, and my degree was in retail and consumer sciences and business, which is interesting. And so I worked in the fashion industry in New York City before. And then I moved to Chicago and Dallas, and I got the startup bug. So after working for a big fashion house in New York City, I went and worked for startups, and I loved it. I loved the exposure to entrepreneurs. I loved the crazy ideas. I loved working nonstop. And the greatest advice I ever got was, you could sit at home and watch Netflix. And this was like when Netflix, I think, was still on DVDs, mind you, or like they would mail them to you. But you can sit at home and watch Netflix or The Bachelor or whatever, but it's not going to make a difference in your life. Or you can buckle up and you can work and you can see what can happen. And that was amazing. Coming from, being in my 20s and like young 20s, and you see someone super successful that went to an Ivy League school and was so driven, it like really resonated in me. And I was like, I'm not going to go home. I'm not going to go to the bar. I mean, I did. Like, I'm not going to, go home and watch Netflix. Like, I'm going to go home and work. And my mother was a single parent, owned her own company, was extremely driven. And all of those things, between my mother being a single parent and driven and working nonstop, my husband like has started 9 billion different companies, and he's insanely successful. And I love underdog stories. Like, I'm randomly wearing Nikes today, so I love, it's a book called Shoe Dog. Do you like shoes? I really like shoes. I used to like nice heels like you have on, but now I wear these or flip-flops. But Phil Knight, who created Nike, has this book, Shoe Dog, and it's essentially his underdog story and how he started it with a waffle maker in his garage and almost died of fumes. But or
amazing.
Everyone knows Oprah. She got fired 26 times before she became Oprah. So all of those stories were so interesting and so inspiring that you can overcome. And that's kind of what all of this is I could have sat in my apartment in Dallas and took opioids and died, or I could have defied the odds and help other people. And that could be people just wanting to lose weight, people that want to live with less stress, or it could be, a mom who had a terrible pregnancy and is trying to get her body back. And so that's what I do every single day, is try and help people feel better in their skin so they don't have to resort to other things.
Right.
Yes.
And I know we get really emotional about this, and we should, because it's an incredible story of overcoming, which is why I wanted people to hear about it, because we all go through life and it's not easy. I keep telling people, we think that we're going to get to this spot where if we're doing everything right, it's going to get easy.
Right.
And if it's not easy, then we're screwing up somehow.
Yeah.
But I just want to tell people, it's not supposed to be easy.
And it's not fun when it's easy.
It's really, it's supposed to be, I like to say, challenging.
Yeah.
So, and some people face more difficult challenges, or not even more difficult, but different, very varied challenges. And I think people like you giving voice to it will help inspire others who go through other challenges. Now, we speak to a lot of people in the world who do struggle with opioids and other drug use. And we know the pain and how that starts and how it can't be stopped so easily, or if ever. And so people understanding that there are places to go and other options to put their mind in a different place
Yeah.
that can help, it's pivotal.
Yeah.
And so while we're talking about that,
Yeah.
let's just talk a little bit about this whole mindfulness trend. Everyone's talking about be in the moment. It's all about mindfulness.
Yes.
When you started in yoga, were there people who thought, "Oh, this is woo-woo. This is silly. What are you doing?"
Yeah. Well, I will say, so Titanium Yoga started about 5 years ago here in Florida. And about like 5 years ago, I would say there wasn't a ton of yoga in, Northeast Florida. I mean, if I would drive around, you'd hit, if I drove around for 30 minutes, you'd hit 5 yoga studios, which that's not a lot. You drive around California and you'd hit 900 yoga studios in 20 minutes. So I guess people knew what it was. And there's different forms of yoga. And so in Northeast Florida, we are a vinyasa flow studio. So what that means is it's kind of like a dance. You move one breath, so one inhale and one exhale to one movement. And so it's a bit of a dance. And I say that I'm not good at dancing, so that's funny. And so it's that is not a lot of people know Bikram. A lot of people in this area practice Baptiste yoga, things like that. Those I say would be like the two that 5 years ago were pretty big, and one of those being Bikram. Some things happened and that's not around anymore. But I wanted to bring a form of yoga that like I actually loved, and like I self-diagnosed myself with ADD, and that's why I like to move and I like to go and do. So it's not as though it was scary at the time, the yoga itself. Now I would say, and it still is scary, the meditation part of it. Sound baths. Sound baths are this insane rage right now.
Right.
That like I could put a sound bath every damn day of the week and they would sell out. But
I love it.
It is amazing.
I don't do yoga and I have never been in a sound bath, but I've heard people like do
It's incredible.
it.
Yeah.
And it's very compelling.
Yes.
It's very peaceful.
Very.
In a world that is not.
Yes.
And so I see
And so
it's very
kind
compelling.
of those things that are different nowadays. And so, but there's so much being put on mindfulness these days. And I'm, if anyone that works for me is going to laugh at this, so like there's two things that I love in life, besides like my child and my husband and my dogs and my family, is an Excel spreadsheet. Like, they're so dreamy. And I love research. And so last Friday, it was so exciting. I was watching the news and the study came out from Georgetown University. They did a study on an antidepressant and anxiety drug. And so they did a test group of people that took the antidepressant and anxiety medication. And then they did a test of people who did 8 weeks of mindfulness. And both groups saw a 20% decrease in depression and anxiety.
Ooh.
And to me, I love that. Like it's me so that makes me like spring out of bed in the morning. Is this works, and it can work in whatever way you want. If you want to go to a yoga class, the last 5 minutes we call shavasana. You lay there. We put a cool towel on your head that smells like lavender. But that's 5 minutes of meditation. Or you can do a whole sound bath, which is 75 to 90 minutes of meditation. But there's tidbits for whoever you are. And I didn't take a sound bath until I was really pregnant and really uncomfortable. And one of our teachers was like, it's time. You need to chill. Ooh. And I took it and it changed my life. The thing that I think really changed my life after it is the teacher that guides them at our studio. Her name is Tiffany. She's incredible, and she now manages our second location. And she, after the class, and after any class, she says, please do not get on your phone for 30 minutes. Well, that is like telling me, like putting a bar of chocolate in front of me and it's like, do not eat that for 30 minutes. And I'm like, well, what if the dog takes it? Like, what about my chocolate bar? And that was incredible to me, to like continue, get in your car, leave, go home, and not touch your cell phone. It's hard to do, but it was pretty amazing. And then I had the best sleep of my life, like 9 months pregnant, wanting to not be pregnant. And so, yeah, so the sleep part of yoga is the best part of yoga, if you ask me. And I love to sleep, and I have to be really good at it with a 1-year-old.
Right. You don't want to miss out on any possibilities for sleep.
Exactly.
With wakefulness.
Yes, exactly. Or like your cell phone or work. So
yeah.
So anyways, going back to mindfulness, it is huge right now, and it is definitely trending, as one would say. But there's so many different ways to get mindfulness, and it could just be taking 5 minutes and sitting in your house alone, or it could be going for a walk and just having quiet time without your phone. It could be going to a yoga studio, however you find, or booking a sound bath and like really diving into 75 to 90 minutes of I don't want to say the word noise, but vibrations that calm your body.
Right.
So, yeah.
And I think oftentimes people need encouragement or a partner in it to actually take the time to do it.
Yes.
And it's that way with fitness. It's that way with reading a book. Oftentimes having people there with you who are kind of in the same position, experiencing something similar is helpful. Mm-hmm. So I'm not a worker-outer. So, if I were to, I think it would probably be helpful.
Yeah,
to be
have
around
a buddy.
Others who are like, it's not about putting your leg over your head.
No.
I see people striking these poses and I'm like,
on that TikTok?
Yeah, that tickety TikTok thing. You see all them do their stretches and
that's
whatever.
What's so important to know is that's not normal. Like, I've been practicing yoga for 7 years, which is not very long. And my body was just not made to do those crazy things. And the metal doesn't hurt, but I couldn't do them before. So that's not yoga. Yoga is connecting your mind and your body. That's all it is. And if you want to, just lay down for 60 minutes in a dark room, great. But you're connecting. And it might be, today I'm not really connecting with my mind, I'm connecting with my feet on the floor. But it's a step. And I do agree, when you have a buddy that can go with you. On Friday, I took a class at our Fruit Cove location, and one of my best friends in the practice, Tiffany, who manages our Fruit Cove location, we were doing down dog, and you lift your leg up, and then she like hit me with her leg, like she bent her, she's really flexible, and she like hit me. And I was like, oh, but it's nice. So you have that like friendly environment, and I love when I'm sitting in the lobby working, because I sit there every single day, and I hear laughter inside the class. Like, I'm sure someone fell, or I'm sure, there was, someone farted or whatever, but it's life and it's funny, and you don't have to sit there, and it doesn't have to be sterile, which is why my first yoga class was not so fun.
Right. I envision like like meditation and then stretching in a way that I've never been able to stretch.
Yeah.
So it's different than that.
Definitely.
I should try.
You need to. I'll take you. We can be class buddies.
So tell me a little bit about your familial background. So what did you grow up in? Is this a big leap from there? And what's your family life like now? So let's start back in the olden days. How'd you grow up? Were you a wild kid or calm or?
Well, this depends who you ask. So I grew up in Arizona. I love Arizona so much. There's no humidity, which is the best part. Your hair always looks good. But so I grew up there, and I lived there until I was 18. And my parents got divorced when I was 3. I have no recollection of my parents being together. And so my dad quickly remarried, and I have a sister who she's 7 years younger than me, and I love her to pieces. She lives in Kansas City, Missouri, but she lives with us a lot because I like steal her, and it's just she's at the yoga studio, she's like playing with my child, like she's the greatest human being ever. So she's 7 years younger than me, and you know, things that make up your life. My dad got remarried right away. He's divorced now. And then my mom got remarried when I was probably in kindergarten, and he was abusive to me in all of the ways. So that definitely shaped my life, and I think that really leads to my I will overcome this no matter what costs. So that is definitely a very tumultuous part of my mother and I's relationship, is that man. They got divorced, I don't remember, the greatest day of my life. And then she's kind of been in other relationships since. And so all of that has definitely shaped and molded me in my relationships and things. I'm like the most loyal person ever. I will give anything away, and and I think that's just how I grew up. And then nowadays I'm married to my incredibly like successful, driven husband that I'm like, how do you do it? Like, how do you find 95 hours in the day? But he does somehow. And we have a 1-year-old, Calvin, who he's so sweet, and he is walking and a lot and torturing our dogs and trying to jump in the pool and all of the things. And then I have 2 stepdaughters, Alex and Parker, that are 19. So one's in college. We just went to Parents' Weekend at college last weekend, which I think brought Brett and I back to like, oh, like we can drink 5 beers before 9 a.m. and go to a football game.
We can do what we want.
We can do what we want.
But then we have a 1-year-old.
Yes, and then it all comes raining back in the morning when he wakes up at 7. I'm like, oh boy. And then we have a 17-year-old, so she's a senior in high school. So we have all of the ranges of age and all the sexes and everything, and so it makes every day exciting.
Yeah, definitely. And so coming from the background that you came from, and now you're making this little cocoon of a family for yourself, and you see like the differences between what you came from and the struggles to be all that you can be as a woman and successful and doing what you love.
Yeah.
So let's talk about how do you get your headspace there, coming from that, and also you and I come from very similar background, but that always eager to please, wanting to be everybody's perfect everything.
Yeah.
How do you now translate into what you're doing? How do you take your power back, and how did that move you into yoga?
Oh boy. I don't know the answer to that question actually. It was it's hard. That's a hard question.
Yeah, it's a process, isn't it? It's like, okay, so you came from what you came and you're trying to rebuild. You have the accident. When we go through our 20s, aren't we unpacking a lot? I always tell people in their 20s, they're like having this out of body, like, what?
Like, where am I going?
What just happened?
Yeah.
What did I come from? And what do I do with that now? Because they go into it like 22, trucking along, and then they're like, wait a minute. They kind of slow down and they start to revisit all of that stuff and start unpacking it. And thinking, okay, now what do I think about this? So you did that. You had made it through kind of those tumultuous, like unpacking years. You have the accident. Now you have to unpack something completely different. And your strength to do that is insanely awesome. What would you say kind of made you feel like I can take this on in a way when it had been stripped from you as a younger person? Now you're at this place where I can take on all this.
Can I? No. I will. So my mother raised me to be very strong. I think it was just seeing what she went through. My mother was not college educated. And so it's so funny because I do not know, I'm no therapist, but I think that is like her number one thing. She really thinks about is like, I am not good enough because I'm not college educated, which there's no one that's worked harder. And I love to say that not everyone is meant to go to college.
Exactly.
Or you're not meant to go, right at the age of 18 to 22. Right. Sometimes it's different.
And for women of that generation, my mom, same story, did not have a great education or system. She was in foster care. She dealt with a lot of stuff. So I always like to say to people, she did better than what she came from.
Exactly.
And that's really all I can expect from anyone.
100. That's what you hope for everyone.
Right.
And I think that's her biggest hurdle is she kind of feels disgraced, like that people judge her for that. And I think it's the complete opposite. She's the hardest working female I know. So for me, I would rather have a work ethic than an education. That's something that's super important to me and that I instill in my son. That's one. And like, play with your toys. Like, I don't know how it's, done in that sense. But coming into a already made family and putting yourself into that, but then I think it works because I came from a divorced family. So I have some insight into where to interject into and where to not.
What they're feeling.
I've learned.
What they're going through.
Exactly, and how to kind of, there's a lot of personalities in a family that you come into that are, that's pre-made, and you're unwrapping it and you're like, oh, maybe I want to put the tape back on here. But that has really helped, but it's also helped with running a business. Is not everyone is the same as you. Not everyone, responds at 7 a.m. because they're awake with a crying baby, and not everyone responds at 11 p.m. And so it really helps me deal with all of those aspects. And I've always been like a rule follower. Sounds so dorky, but I've definitely, I didn't follow some rules like my senior year of high school, and I think I was grounded like my whole senior year of high school, but I'm a rule follower, and that really helps when running a business. Is we have these rules for our teachers, for our employees, and for our clients, and it's really hard to reinforce them, especially when you've had relationships with them for so long.
And you're a people pleaser.
And so you want to say yes, and you want to make them happy, but at the end of the day, like, this is a business. And that's something, especially in the yoga community, I have found that there are a lot of people, a lot of businesses in the yoga community that they don't completely function as a business. Like, no business is a charity, but that's something that I love Excel spreadsheets, and everything comes down to that. Like, at the end of the day, we are a business, and we have to do what's best for the business, because, and this is the number one question I get asked when someone inquires about yoga and calls or, stops in, is my first class free? And at a lot of places it is. And I say no. And it took me a long time to put those two words out of my mouth, but I had to start sticking up for myself, which that kind of goes back to my stepdad. And, it takes a long time to learn things. And saying no to people is really hard. And so when people ask, is my first class free? No, but here's two options for you. And sometimes you totally lose clients out of it, but I have to pay my electric bill and I have to pay you to teach a class, and so it's an interesting thing because yoga is very kind of been I feel like I'm going to get in so much trouble for saying this, but kind of more charity. But we're in a building, we have to pay our rent, we pay our property taxes, our HOA.
You can't help anyone if you're not in a position to help anyone.
Right.
And if you're not able to pay your employees to help others, then you get washed up.
Exactly. And so that's where when like yoga meeting business is an interesting thing, and there's a lot of stories of yoga business owners and things that have come out, and that's where I love to sit back and I think, but I'm biased, like we're doing it right. We have an amazing staff, and most of them have been with us since day one, which that makes me sit back and like cry. But we are a little family, and our clients, I mean, the amount of people that have been with us since day one, like it's shocking. And so we're doing things right, but it's hard to say no to people that like you've formed a real relationship with. So
have you encountered naysayers along the way as you've started your business, as you've decided that this is what you're going to do?
Completely. I mean, and it comes in different forms. I think I have friends that think I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss.
Yes, you're allowed.
That think I'm batshit crazy. Like you're doing what and why and how, and and that's friends. And I know that I've had family that have, this is terrible. I love you, Mother. But I remember one day at like the very beginning, my mom was like, I paid for you to go to college and you're doing what? You didn't have to go to college for that. And I disagree. Like I had a minor in business, and I also we sell like we have a little boutique as well,
right,
which I love because that was my college major. And so yes, there's complete naysayers. I mean, there's complete naysayers in my family, my friends, my community. So it's, you know what? Like I look at it in a positive light. If they're not talking about you, maybe you're not doing it very well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I'll take it positively.
So on that same note then, this podcast focuses on highlighting women who have overcome incredible things and achieved great things. And you're at the top of my list for that. I just love it. Do you see any specific advantages for women, young women, women in general, a unique advantage to dipping their toe into yoga?
Yeah.
Like, what do you see? Like, I'm a real estate agent. I work every hour of the day. To take time for myself, it's not something I really do a lot of. So, like, what is your advice when you are encountering women today that are doing so many things?
Yeah.
What do you think the advantages are for women specifically in this realm?
Okay, well, we'll use you as an example. Cindey, do you feel stress?
Yes.
Perfect. That was easy. And so that's kind of what it is everyone has a stressor in their life. And their goals are very different. So a very easy one, besides someone asking, is my first class free? The next question is, I can't touch my toes. I'm like, okay, well, it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's a practice. Yoga is a practice, and you're going to practice at touching your toes. Oh. And you're going to practice at feeling less stressed when you come to yoga. But going back to, you have to figure out you. So something I love to do, which is like my anti-stressor, is I love to get a pedicure. I hate having my fingernails painted, but there is nothing more in life that I love than getting my feet rubbed.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And my husband won't rub my feet, so I go get a pedicure. And that is like my time where I simply sit and enjoy something. And so everyone has those thing. So like my pedicure is 90 minutes. So that is 90 minutes I take for me where I don't have my cell phone, I don't have my computer. I just sit there and I love life and I calm down. So, but you have to figure out what that is in your life. Is that going to, a Pilates class? Is that going for a walk on the beach? Is that, everyone has, my husband like goes and works out like in the gym or goes for a run. And so everyone has their thing. And I think that's what it is. It's making time for that thing that helps you de-stress. And if that's yoga, amazing. But you have to figure out what it is. Because if you just keep going and you just keep doing, the stress is going to keep building. And so I guess that's, you mentioned this earlier, was a buddy. And that's, I think, the greatest part about it is like, grab a buddy and try it and see what happens. And it might, the first time you might be like, okay, but I always think you have to do things in threes. And so you give it 3 college tries and you see if it's for you. And if it's not, it's not. And if it is, you dive, we both, I think, function on the same level of like, you dive all in, face first to a pool with no water. Like that's, how it is. I go 100% or I'm not going at all.
Yeah.
And so it's that, what are you comfortable with? What time do you want to save for just you? And it doesn't matter what stage in life you are, a teenager, in your 20s, in your 30s, older, you have to take time for you. And that's really what we preach on our Instagram. We don't have TikTok, but on like our Instagram is taking time for you and being with yourself, which is the hardest thing to do. And I think a lot of the scarcity of yoga is you have to be quiet. Like you're not talking for an hour, the teacher is. And so just being in your own head for 60 minutes is traumatizing for a lot of people. Yeah. Or for me, I want to go grab a Post-it note and make a list of things. I'm not allowed to do that, even though I've done it before.
Right. So you touched on different women, different age groups. What do you see for the future in your business? What direction are you thinking of going? Have you seen an implementation with like little people?
Oh my gosh,
young
yes.
people, high school stressed out kids?
Yes.
And older people? What is the difference and where do you see it going for you? What's happening on the scene?
So I think, obviously, like I love watching the news. We just had the hurricane and I'm that person that's like, what's going on with Nicole? But so I think what's happening in yoga is incredible. And it happened about 2 years ago when huge NFL and NBA players started practicing yoga. And they'll do it on the field.
Oh, yeah.
They'll do it before, games in like the locker room. They're, like they're physical therapists, things like that. The people working on the athletes are prescribing yoga. Mm-hmm. So it is becoming very mainstream, very normal. I love my house is the church. The football on Sundays is church for us. And we're like a huge sports family, but I'm a huge tennis fan myself, and you just see these professional athletes getting on board, and they talk about, Tom Brady talks about how, his eating and how, mindfulness and yoga has helped him have this huge career. And when you hear things like that, you're like, well, I think it works. And so I think it's trending in a wonderful direction. And that being said, so our first studio is in Ponte Vedra Beach. Our second studio is in Fruit Cove. There's a lot of schools around both of those studios. And I love getting phone calls from even JU. We want to do a beach yoga class. We want to do private lessons for, our kids because we've read this article or we come to yoga. Like we've had every sports team, all of it, and they see the benefits. And the best part is when the kids request it, and then the coaches kind of like call or ask. I was like, oh yeah, like we know them. So it's definitely, kids know about it. And then going even younger than that, I mean, my son is 1, and the only way I can get him to eat is by playing this thing on his iPad, or an iPad called Coco Melon. You probably have no idea what it is, but it is.
I'll be looking it up.
I don't know. It's like a cartoon or animation, whatever. And I died one day when it was a whole little, they're like 10-minute episodes. It just gets him to down some food, and we can live today. But it was on yoga. And I was like, oh my gosh. I sent it to all the yoga teachers. I was so excited. But it is, elementary schools are implementing it. In the UK, actually, every single public school has 20 minutes of mindfulness a day. I wish America would do that. And they did a study about how suicide rates have gone down in the UK because of 20 minutes of mindfulness a day. It is trending in an incredible direction, and it's becoming more well-known. And I think that'll only help with, these studies coming out about medication or suicide rates, or, in the depths of COVID, we were closed. But we would meet out on the beach, we would meet out at the park, and it really helped. But I think one thing is we had some people, like an older demographic, that came to the yoga studio before COVID.
Right.
They never came back.
Oh.
They're still feeling scared.
Yeah.
And completely respect that. And you can do home practices and whatnot, but those are people that I'll see them at the grocery store, and I'm like, I don't want to be like, please come back, I miss you, but it's okay. Like,
it's really good for their heart and their physicality.
I want you back.
Yeah.
I miss you. And so, but you know what? Everything comes full circle, and at some point they'll come back. But
and maybe continuing some of those beach venues
where it's
for them,
outdoors,
where they feel better about that.
Exactly.
It may just change the direction of where classes are held now, I guess. We didn't consider
we didn't
outside
think of trekking everything to the beach before COVID.
So as you know, this podcast is directed toward inspirational women, and you are, and I want you to share. Now I'm going to get teary.
Don't.
Because it's very important to me.
Yeah.
Share with us what advice you would have for young women, or women of any age, but especially people who have to overcome obstacles in life, as we all do. What advice could you give to a younger person, or a person who's going to encounter some very harrowing and difficult obstacles? What would you say to your younger self, or what would you say to those people?
Keep trying. That's the first thing that pops into my head. Don't give up. I think everyone has an idea in their head of what they want, and chase that dream. And I know for me, I love to work. Is that weird that if you ask me my favorite thing to do in a day, I love to go to work.
I'm the same.
I get so much out of it. I take in people's energy. I know that sounds so weird, but I feed off of that.
Yeah.
And just their smiles.
The joy.
It is. And so find out what that is. Not everyone loves to work, but harness in on what that joy is, and what can you bring to give that joy, and what joy can you get out of it. And just, I know that for this generation, they've lived through something like COVID. No one ever could see that, and so that's created a whole host of problems on their own. But sitting back and thinking, what do you enjoy? And for me, I was a really bad employee. I That sounds really
You had to be
weird.
a boss.
No joke. Like, you know, there are little girls out there that are like, you know, what I want to do in my life is I want to get married and I want to have a baby. Those things never came out of my life. I was like, I want to be a boss. No, but it wasn't those words. It was, I want to own my own business, but I had no idea what it would be, and it just fell into my lap. But by taking those, I took it in. Like, after my accident, I had a lot of time and a lot of thinking time where I was like, do I go back to grad school? I thought about going to dental school for a hot second. Like, I thought of all of these things, and I had time to think. And especially for young girls, think about what it is that you love. You know, you're so much of our life nowadays is on devices. So what are you loving in those videos, in those podcasts, in those movies? Like, what do you love about it? And figure out how to do it, because if you ask women before you that have had a hard time with anything, more than likely they're going to help you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the greatest part about it, is asking for help is the hardest thing to do because someone might say no. But if you never ask, it's always no. Mm-hmm. And that's what I like. I will ask anything, and it's so uncomfortable, but if they say no, okay.
Someone else will pick up the banner. Someone else
Yes.
will help. Someone else will be really, really happy to help.
Yeah. So ask, girls, women, whoever, just asking for the help is the hardest part. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so thank you for that. Thank you for your time today. We're so grateful that Ashley Hanna has joined us today from Titanium Yoga to tell us so much about overcoming serious obstacles. And we're so grateful for your time.
Thank you, Cindey, for having me. It was so much fun. We had lots of tears, but it was fun.
Yeah. And join us for the next episode, and we hope that you find encouragement in it all.